The mailman doesn't deliver on a Sunday.
If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
Anthony for three. Bang! J.R. Smith! We just saw men fly. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Cleveland! This is for you!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gaine. Joining me, as always, Chris Nambu. The 2024 season has come to an end. The Boston Celtics, the best team all year, are finally the NBA champions, defeating the Dallas Mavericks 4-1. We're going to be diving into the amazing success for the Boston Celtics. What's next for the Dallas Mavericks? We'll be giving out some playoff awards. We'll also be discussing the big news about Monty Williams getting sacked by the Detroit Pistons. But before we get into all that, I just want to thank you all so much for making this your first listen for NBA coverage. Remember, you're on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you guys think. You're on Apple Podcasts, you're on Spotify. You leave that 5-star review and you do that. We'll keep producing that content. Chris, man, before we get into it, been a hot minute. How you doing?
Been hot. That's a great pun. In the middle of a heat wave here. Doing great. Hanging inside. Got the AC blasting. Man, I was at a local bar for the Celtics Game 5 win to seal it off, and the energy in the city the past week here in Boston, it's been palpable, and so much with it, man. It's been obviously not fully part of it. I am still always through and through a Bulls fan, but I am very happy for the Celtics, man. I'm very happy that this has been coming. So I'm good. The city's good. Getting ready for the parade on Friday. But yeah, man, it's been quite a ride, the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, let's start positive. Boston, they were the best team throughout this year. They obviously they had a little bit of help throughout the playoffs with injuries and that. I still think they were the best team in the East, and they definitely were coming out of the East, unless like not only Porzingis got hurt, but Tatum and Brown too, and even then they might have given it a shot. But we really just saw the difference, and obviously I think the experience of 2 years ago definitely helped them a little bit in this series. But I think they were just better across the board. Like the role players for Boston just looked like another level compared to what Dallas had. And when you have that luxury, when your role players are almost as reliable as your stars, I mean, it's a pretty hard formula to lose with.
Yeah, and this is impromptu, but if you had to come up with one word for the Celtics and their season, what would it be? One word pops in my head immediately.
Honestly, it's just beautiful. It was beautiful. When they play their best basketball, it was tough it was just impossible to stop. And the way that it flowed, no matter who was in the team, it was just really, really impressive.
Me, the word I keep thinking about is inevitable. The Celtics championship has felt inevitable, and I think there's been so much criticism over the years, despite the fact that they made the Eastern Conference Finals, took it to a Game 7 in Tatum's rookie year. They kept knocking on the door, came close again last year, and it's just been coming. It's been a wave after wave of them getting so close. And it's really just been the harsh criticism outside of that locker room, outside of Boston, that's kind of led this narrative to lead people to not believe in the Celtics. But everything they did throughout the season, and like in the macro, it feels inevitable from that standpoint, from how this franchise has patiently built this team, not panicked and gone for a big star, not gotten rid of too many assets, got the right guys around their young stars. And then also on the court, it's felt inevitable every game. And while there is like this this serious PTSD of fans and maybe not the players anymore, it felt like they really weathered the storm differently this season than they did in past seasons. But anytime another team would start to score 2 points, 4 points, put together a little run, fans are starting to panic. But this team is different, and it feels inevitable because every time they just got back into their game, their beautiful game, it just kept coming. The threes kept coming. The spacing kept working. The way that they could play make from every single position kept working. And not only is it inevitable in this season, just this championship, but it feels like their dominance of the league with the way they've been building up has been inevitable. And I think they're here now. This is just the beginning of what's been going on over the past 7 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, like now, once you get over that hump, now you kind of look at it and just think health, 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 health. That's one of the biggest things that stops teams from dominating is the health of their team. Can they keep this team healthy? I think they're going to be able to keep the team together for the most part. I know Al Horford's coming back next year. They've already extended Drew Holiday, so and I think Tatum's going to get the upgrade on Brown and get the biggest contract in NBA history. So I think the team's going to stay together. Now it's just a question: does health fail them or not? Because if not, they're going to be top of the East. Or probably they're going to be the favorites all next year. Come out of the Eastern Conference, and it's this year was impressive. They really needed to do it. I don't want to like hit on them too much. But they needed to do the sweep to kind of really just negate that whole like flaking tag or how it was like easier to get through. Like if they had really dug in and swept the Dallas Mavericks, that definitely would have helped in quieting that narrative. It would have. That's just a fact. But
the blowout. Also, I'll concede the point that the blowout in Game 4 was like a little dent in what was. I mean, they have a few dents along the way, but I think that just speaks to the quality of the teams they face despite some injuries. And it's Luka Doncic, and we'll get into who our picks are for player of the playoffs and whatever. But I mean, I'll just already say it. Like Luka's the best player in the playoffs, and despite him not playing as well as I think he could have in some series, but they faced Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, a hungry Mavs team at home. Like that was the Mavs were not going to get swept. They were not going to get swept. That's I'm not going to use that as a knock against them. Maybe the blowout. Maybe the blowout.
The blowout is fact. But even after that blowout happened, I was kind of like, I texted you before the game. I was fully expecting Boston to do the exact same thing. Wasn't quite as emphatic, but it was a blowout to secure the series win. I mean, give Brad Stevens a lifetime contract in Boston. That man has done magical things in that front office. He was a really great coach, and somehow he's even better as an executive. And the way he put this team together was very impressive. Don't get me wrong. I don't think any championship team has ever had so much help from other teams in building their championship roster. Think of how much help they've got from the Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks in being able to build this team out. But it's always great when a team is aggressive but not desperate, and then and it comes up trumps. That's always what you always want to believe, that your front office or your team is always going to be willing to try things, always going to be willing to make big decisions in order to try and win a championship. That's what Boston did, and it's come through for them.
Yeah, and just thinking about like not panicking, not making crazy moves over the last few years. Think about the teams that have won championships, and I love this. You look at this list. The Celtics, they're 2 stars, homegrown stars. Nuggets last year, homegrown stars. Warriors the year before that, beating the Celtics, those homegrown stars. Bucks before that. I mean, but Bucks, I guess you could say that they acquired Drew, and Drew was that missing piece, as he was to a somewhat lesser degree missing piece here, but that was Giannis. I think the only time we can point to is kind of the Raptors with their rental of Kawhi, but it's been about homegrown teams ever since. Really, I mean, if you look far back enough, like the Spurs back in 2013-14, that's also homegrown. Really, the last time like a cobbled together team with stars that won it was the Heat. Like the Celtics are another iteration of these teams that have
the Lakers
focused.
Too. Lakers in 2020.
Fair. Yeah, I'm forgetting the big one. But was that really a champion? That was a bubble championship.
Don't get me started on that.
But no, truly, the patience up to this point has been impressive, and the balance of this team has continued to shine through. Not just the stars, but are we seeing the the videos of Tatum and all the quotes that he came up with on that night of the win. He's just quoting everybody.
Yeah, he was writing them down
I
all playoffs.
know, I know.
Practicing them
Um,
after every game, yeah.
one that he said that I would not have noticed this, but this is the Kanye speech when he won a Grammy. He was like, "If I didn't win it, what would they be saying?
Yeah, I
Guess
guess
we'll
we'll never
never
know.
know." I was like, wait, that sounds way too familiar. But uh, I kind of want to think about that though, because if we had walked out of this postseason with the Celtics losing to Doncic and Irving, would it be another conversation about, you know, this is too long not winning a championship with such a good team? Is it tired? Is this a team that just needs to be broken up just for some freshness? And what do we talk about Tatum and his inconsistent scoring at times? What do we talk about? Especially you said health. Kristaps not being healthy. He played one, albeit very important game, one game in this entire postseason. And then Al Horford getting older. Is their bench good enough? Like so many of these conversations would have been had, but they put all that to rest. No one's gonna be talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. Like they went and they did it. I will say that like it's always going to be impressive when your homegrown stars come together and win you a championship like Brown and Tatum have done. So that's always going to live in the memory. But you definitely would want to believe that they win another title in this era. To that would just like double down on it, and just that would be like make it this is a real memorable version of the Boston Celtics. I don't think the one title is enough. Like with the big three back in the day, they only got that one ring, two finals appearances.
Yeah.
But I think this team is capable of going and winning another title. I'm not going to say they're going to become a dynasty or anything like that, but they're going to be in the
Yeah, I
conversation
hate that word.
for the next what 3, 4, 5 years. I fully expect them to be in the conversation every year. And yeah, I mean, it's just matchups. So this playoffs was matchups were so important throughout these entire playoffs. Like I still like if it was Minnesota or Dallas or Denver against Boston in the finals, that would have been a completely different situation. I think, especially Denver. It's important to
Denver, sure. I'll give you Denver.
It's important to play a team that hasn't been there before to win your first title. That hasn't been to the finals before. We saw it with LeBron James. That was how he got his first title. He had 2 experiences against teams that had either won titles or had been to the finals before, and he lost. And then they obviously went up against that young OKC team and came out with the W. Like it happens in a lot of situations. Teams' first titles, stars' first titles come after a failure and playing against a team that hasn't been there and done that. But that it was definitely on my mind throughout the playoffs. Like the way the matchups work was just insane this year. This year was so matchup specific. It wasn't just this is the best team in the West. This is the best team in the East. Like they're gonna face off. It was never about that. It was the way teams match up with each other.
Let me agree and disagree with that, because I think 100% on the Western front and on the Eastern front, because the injuries will be discussed and it's going to be easy to say, oh well, Celtics only played 60% of their games against with a team that had an all-star or an all NBA player out. Over 60% of those games were facing teams who were missing key players. But I don't think it mattered. I mean, the Heat. If the Heat have a healthy Jimmy Butler, it doesn't matter. If the Bucks were healthy, I don't think it matters. If the 76ers were healthy, I don't think it matters. So the Knicks were healthy, it doesn't matter. I think the Celtics were still beating all those teams. And especially this is the fact that KP was out as well. Like that one game that we saw with Kristaps Porzingis out there against the Mavs, that showed like a true superpower team. If they have him healthy, they're already like favored without him, but with him on the floor, I mean, if we're just going to say, okay, if everyone's healthy, what happens? I think they're still at the top of the Eastern Conference, and there's not a lot I think any of those teams are going to do to convince themselves that they're at the Celtics level. You can get lucky in the playoffs and have a couple. It's a make or miss league. That's how they lost 3 games this playoff run. But in terms of like true parity, like a lot of conversations going around parity, We can have that conversation in the Western Conference. With the Eastern Conference, inevitability. The Celtics are inevitable. They're not going to be matched by any of those teams. Doesn't matter how healthy they were going to be. Truly, I can't convince myself of otherwise.
Yeah, I somewhat agree. Don't get me wrong. I agree they were going to get through one way or another, but I definitely think a healthy Knicks squad would have really tested them. The Celtics would have won.
Yeah,
they would have won. Don't get me
Sure.
wrong, but they would have really they definitely would have had to, made sweat a lot more than I think any other team could have done in the Eastern Conference. But again, 60-3 playoff run. That's pretty hard to argue with. Like that's just domination. Whether you talk about the injuries and things like that, it was a pure and total domination from the Boston Celtics. We saw it all throughout the regular season. We had our doubts, don't get me wrong, but I think it was justified. It felt like their time.
Yeah. The Western Conference, though, since we're just kind of looking back on how things played out and especially matchups, I 100% agree with that because a lot of times you wonder, is this the best team that could have stepped up to the plate? And not to say the Mavs can't have that conversation, but I think the matchups totally played out in a very interesting way. I mean, if you just go back to the first round, looking back and thinking about if the Thunder matched up against the Lakers in round 1.
Yeah.
If you had the Nuggets and the Mavs in round 2. If it wasn't Nuggets versus the Timberwolves, who clearly gave them problems with their size and without anyone to really match up toe-to-toe with Anthony Edwards, I think that things would have played out a little bit differently. To that regard, I think the Western Conference may have played out differently. And then injuries as well. What does everything look like if Kawhi is actually healthy? That's a question we ask literally every year for the past 4 years. But truthfully, like the Mavs would have not, I think, had an easy time. That could have gone either way. The way that they were able to defend the Clippers, going back to that. But the Western Conference is a little bit more of a crapshoot.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. Any final thoughts on Boston before we switch it over to the Mavs?
I want to say that everyone needs to apologize to Boston. And maybe not, because I think that the reason why everybody gets so outside of Boston gets so critical of Boston is because of the fan base, and the fan base they know it. They know that they're a loud group. They're a proud group, and a lot of teams to be proud of, including this one now. But I think that the narrative around them has to change. It has to change. The respect needs to be there for a team that has earned it. And I think I want to look back to one comparison that I think I originally thought of with Tatum and Brown. What was it, 2 years ago now, that we're talking about, should we trade Brown? Should you trade to like balance out the team? And you kind of wonder about what wing pairs ever survive that long. You can't think of many. And you think of a team like the Raptors when they had Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady. Two guys like that couldn't coexist. And to look at Tatum, to look at Brown, to see how they totally embody like team play, unselfish, like truly humble, pursuing a team goal. I mean, that's something to be in awe of in terms of just sportsmanship, in terms of athletes and the egos that you have to balance. And that, I think, is a huge win, not just obviously a championship, but a huge win for, them as men to have done that. So just hats off, man. It's from a non-salty, jealous perspective, it's been amazing to watch them succeed as players.
That's definitely fair. I think the narrative does change now. Once you get that ring, that the narrative starts to change, because anytime anyone tries to knock them back or slander them or anything, just like, yeah, well, they're the champion, so you can't really do that until we actually see it happen. Dallas. So many people are ready to just say Luka Doncic sucks. Luka Doncic is no superstar. Blah 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 blah. Well, anyone who actually believes that is an idiot. Luka Doncic just led the playoffs in points, rebounds, assists, steals, 3-pointers made, field goals made. First ever player with 600 plus points, 200 plus boards, 175 plus assists, and 40 plus steals in a playoff run. You cannot tell me that this guy is just done and he's never gonna be at that level. This is his first time going to the finals. Very banged up. Don't get me wrong. The defense was terrible in those 3 games. I think that the fact that he was hurt had an impact on that. I'd say he was definitely just putting all his energy into offense. Then we saw him come back in that game. What was it, game 4 that they won, and he actually played some defense. So I think it's there. And this guy's still 25 years old. This guy is uber talented. Yes, he has to come back in better shape. That's just simple. That's been labeled at him the whole time he's been in the NBA. He does have to get into better shape, but he will absolutely be back. I don't hear any slander that says that Luka Doncic just showed us that he's not this level of superstar or MVP or a championship winning player. Like that's a load of crap.
I look at it this way, that in the same way that a lot of criticism went the Celtics' way because they earned that criticism, because they were that good that the criticism was there for them to elevate their game. I think on an even higher level, I apply that to Luka Doncic, because I still think he was the best player in this playoffs. And he did not play well. He did not. Like, for him, like the first couple rounds, yes, he was injured. Rising above that is also, I mean, is expected. And to a degree, he did. I mean, he played those games, he played those minutes. Like, you can't ask a ton more out of him in that regard. But in terms of the ebb and flow of his leadership, can't be there in the future. The ebb and flow of his effort on defense can't be there, because you see it. You see how good this team is when he plays defense, man. You see it in game 4. You see it in his matchups against the Timberwolves. Different team, sure, but him actually staying in front of guys, him actually like knowing his rotations, him not playing just dumb defense at times, especially off ball. Mm-hmm. So many boneheaded mistakes that can be cleaned up. And again, like you mentioned, experience, like that is something that you saw at times with the Celtics. A young team making it that far and minor mistakes in the margins. The Celtics didn't. Celtics still make some of their mistakes. We won't go back on them, but they make up for it with their effort and their team play. And very rarely are you seeing that in the same way you see it from Doncic game in and game out. You don't know what version of him you're going to get. And all that to say, dude, he was the best player in the playoffs. That's how much better he can get. Just getting his head straight. Maybe that's just who he is. Maybe we won't get that. But for him to have a subpar performance and still be in the finals, and he led, that team would not be in the finals without him. Kyrie had his moments. That team overall, like PJ Washington had his moments. Daniel Gafford, Lively, that was the best front court in the playoffs. A lot of good front courts in the playoffs. But I can't, no one can walk away from this saying like, oh, that was their one chance. Oh, Luka's not going to make it back, or
yeah,
Luka showed his true colors. Like, I think there's another level he's going to hit, and you just hope that he stays focused on the game to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think it was a disappointing finish for the Mavs, but obviously it's their first experience for a lot of them getting to the NBA finals, and I just didn't like the experiencing. There was too many times where you just saw like Luka lackadaisically dribbling the ball up the court and just wasn't prepared for the intensity that Boston were going to bring defensively. Like, right, they're going to pick him up like full court and like be really intense around him all the time. Like, he just wasn't prepared for that. And same with other guys like PJ Washington and Kyrie Irving when they were on the ball. Sometimes they just weren't ready for that intensity that every member of the Celtics who stepped on the floor played with. And we just didn't see that level from the Dallas Mavericks. And that's something that you got to learn from. That's something you should be expecting, but I guess you don't really know until you're there. And I don't think it's something they were ever really able to adjust to. Man, Kyrie just cannot play basketball in Boston. Like,
I know it's such a tired and such a homer take, but unfortunately he has somewhat proven it to be true.
It's true. Like 14.3 points per game, 14.3 points per game, 5.6 assists, 3 of 17 from deep in the 3 games in Boston.
That was the killer.
Shot 34% overall from the field in Boston.
Mhm.
Like, and we saw him have 2 great games in Dallas. Like, and so it really is just, I don't know if it's the basketball gods that are just against him after all the shit he did in Dallas or in Boston, stamping on the unlucky, all that sort of stuff, or it's just the Boston fans that are just living rent free in his head and he just can't get over himself to perform there.
I mean, I'm going to stick to basketball on this one because I would say off the court, Kyrie has shown so much of his true colors in the best way possible. And the sportsmanship he showed, like if you saw him after that game, the first thing he did is go to his old team, shake everybody's hand, and his comments after the game, the positive things he had to say about his old team. And none of it performative, all of it like with true insight about, you know, who that team is. And there's nothing personal there. And I think that is something to be celebrated. And I'd rather focus on him like being like I guess cleaning up his perception. That's another narrative that I'd like to see change, because this whole perception we have of Kyrie that he deserved, that nobody needs to apologize for, but that he deserved, I think that's over and done with, and his growth as a person seems to be pretty clear. His growth on the court was there throughout the playoffs. Like he was a true second star. You saw his defense. I mean, you also saw the limits of his defense. I think what we got to see with him against the T-Wolves, like he could play a little bit small, but playing against some of the bigger guards and playing against Tatum and Brown, what they were able to do against him, that showed up. But the scoring, yeah, that was to see him not take threes once he started to get a little cold, and to see him get away from scoring in the mid-range, which they desperately needed. They really needed that from him, and it just didn't come through. I just got it. That's a testament to the Celtics, man. Like Kyrie is one of the greatest scorers we've ever seen in history. One of the most creative finishers. And the Celtics, even without Kristaps for half of that series, really most of the series, just one game that where Kristaps was truly Kristaps, one game in one quarter, they still gave Kyrie a hard time. They still had 3 guys on the ball anytime he got deep in the paint. And that, I'd say that was more of a success of the Celtics rather than Kyrie, because I think there's maybe limits to what he can do, and it got to him eventually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll let you have that. But definitely then, when that did happen, then it was also another mark against the Bro guys of Dallas just being that
let's talk about
level below Boston.
Yeah.
I think of Derek Jones Jr., PJ Washington, Maxi Kleber throughout the finals went 10 of 40 combined from deep, 25%.
Yeah, very different from the series before.
Yeah,
it took them 2 games, two games and 3 quarters to get their first corner 3. The staple of their offense against the T-Wolves. The T-Wolves were helping a lot off the corners. And I mean, half of that is like, okay, you play the numbers game, especially with OKC. I mean, OKC could be looking at this and being like, hey, we played them very similarly. And Derek Jones Jr. shot like 50% from 3. PJ Washington in fourth quarter shot like 70% from 3. So a lot of that is make or miss. But I think they needed that extra bit from a guy like Tim. They talked about Timmy. Timmy's coming back. And Timmy came back, and he was a net negative, like a huge negative. Bad shots, didn't make open shots. And it was those guys, like they needed their version of Sam Hauser to come on, and when they're not hitting threes, it won. And it ended up being Dante Exum. But when Dante Exum is the guy that you're relying on at times, then it's a little dicey. So I think one thing that we can look at with some of these teams in the playoffs and how far they made it is how much of this can you rely on next year, or how much of that was just, luck of make or miss. And some of that with Derek Jones Jr. and PJ, like you can't expect them to carry from 3. You can't expect that.
I think especially Derek Jones Jr., I think there was a lot of periods throughout the season where people were kind of like that, oh my God, I can't believe they've got him on a minimum deal just for this year. But then I think in the finals, I think we saw why this is a guy who's on a minimum deal, and why this is a guy who there's only so much that they can pay him. I think. I don't think you're giving him more than like a 2-year, $15 million deal. Like you can't give him any more than that. I think that's around the mark that he should be getting.
That's fair.
Like I
don't
want to.
think they want to overreact though. He has his place on that
like the threes are not like necessarily his game or anything like that. Like it's the defense, it's the athleticism. That's why they brought him in, and that's why he works so well with this team for the most part this season. But you need legitimate shooting in the playoffs to succeed in the NBA today. And for the most part, the Mavericks don't really have it outside of Luka and Kyrie, and the way how badly the two of them were shooting from deep. Like that was a big mark against them in these finals, even though like the likes of Brown and Tatum were pretty bad as well, but Luka and Kyrie were just awful shooting the deep ball. So that's when you need someone that is just reliable, like you said, like a Sam Hauser, like that type of player that is just a shooter, pure shooter, and will always, whenever they're on the floor, if the ball touches their hands, they're going to shoot the ball, and you can be pretty confident that they're going to go down. Like that type of player, I think, is an area that the Mavs should be looking to add, even if it's as a sixth man this summer.
Yeah, getting off of Timmy's contract and finding someone a little bit more reliable is definitely a huge priority, I would say, for them. Leaving it. Otherwise, I think everybody's in the right spot. And a lot of this is margin. And the margins are so important against a team who, I mean, obviously has no holes. The Celtics had no holes. There's nothing except for their own bouts of inconsistency, which they would match with crazy runs of threes. Like there was not anything that you could really poke at too much there. Whereas with the Mavs, you're gonna live with some of those. And the teams that did died by them. OKC died by PJ Washington in the fourth. The Mavs died with them as well. And at the end of the day, I don't think the Mavs overreact to it, and they just improve. And I think one bright spot at times was Jaden Hardy.
Yeah.
And he didn't, obviously you can't rely on too many Jaden Hardy minutes in a final series when he's just starting to come into his own. But I think he flashed enough that you hope that he's a guy, if Kyrie is having some trouble, that you can bring in, give him some serious minutes as he's learning to play playoff level defense, as he's learning to be a better creator. And I mean, he's getting to the rim when he wanted to. He was getting those shots when he wanted to. And if you can rely on that for like 25 minutes in a playoff series, I mean, that's I think internal growth that they can expect next year, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big aim for them, trying to really push him on. Hopefully, he's learning a lot from playing with not even just Luka, playing with Kyrie as well, and hopefully that's going to aid his development, because he definitely has those flashes. Like obviously, he went from pretty much nothing last year to flashes this year, and hopefully then you take that bit more of a consistent jump. Wild thought: should the Mavericks apply any consideration to making a run at Klay Thompson?
No.
That's a desperate move, you think?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, how much would it cost? Too much.
Yeah.
It would cost too much.
Apparently he wants a 3-year deal. Didn't say anything about money, but yeah. It's if they like imagine that like that's the type of guy like Klay is like that type. Obviously Klay is elite level player. I don't think they get him in as to be their sixth man. I think him and the Warriors will figure something out to make sure he stays in Golden State. I believe they both parties want that, but if they could find a way to get him, like, I don't know, what was it, like 3 year, like 3 years, 60 million or something like that. Like, is that something that they could swing? Like, imagine him instead of Tim Hardaway Jr.
Maybe.
Like, maybe it's something to consider. But they definitely, the big thing now, I think that the gaping thing for Dallas is they have to improve on Tim Hardaway Jr. I know he wasn't 100% healthy, but the fact that even after he had that hot streak in Game 4 where he went 5 of 7 deep, they still didn't feel that he should be on the floor. No. They didn't give him any sort of minutes in Game 5 until it was too late. So like I think that's the ultimate sign that the coach just didn't really believe that he was going to do enough for them.
Yeah, I think the the driving kick that you saw from them against the Timberwolves, once they really started getting them reacting, and you had Derek Jones Jr. who needed to be closed out on, he would attack. Same with PJ Washington, and the playmaking you saw from those two as well, off the dribble. I don't know. I don't know if you want to lose too much of that. So that's a tough offseason conversation to have about how to improve a little bit. But Klay Thompson's a big, and that's going to be a conversation a lot of teams will have themselves is, does he need a fresh start or is he just washed up?
Yeah.
That's a big conversation.
Big risk. It might be too early in the stage of this Mavs team to take a risk like that on a guy like Klay. One thing I'll say, disappointing finals. Just like last year, it just was really bad. But it was even worse about this year is there wasn't that really close game that went down to like the final minute or the final shot. There wasn't that individual performance where someone really just goes, I am him, and just dominated the game. It was a really disappointing finals for me. Like, it doesn't, like, not taken away from the Celtics. Just I expected more going into it, and I think most fans, and I think the TV ratings reflected this, was pretty disappointing.
And maybe it was again that were inevitable. By the time it was game 3, end of game 3, it felt inevitable, and I mean truly it was, and it was just that outside chance that would the Celtics be the first team to ever give up a 3-0 lead. But on the whole, got me thinking a little bit with talking about Hardy and some of the things he showed, and Gafford, PJ Washington, these kind of new names. Gafford's been around, but he's been doing his thing. But for him to do it on that stage, PJ Washington, for him to upgrade his game from being in Charlotte to then a few months later competing on the national stage, NBA Finals. Any other names that as we kind of think about the playoffs as a whole, any other names that pop in your head as surprising characters, surprising players that have done things to make you see them differently, to kind of change the landscape of playoff heroes or successful players as a whole?
I mean, like, I don't know if Derek White is the right answer, but he's definitely one.
He's the right answer. Absolutely, never. He's never the wrong answer to anything.
Like,
right?
The chip tooth and all in the final game, like that's
so such Derek a great White. Image. Yeah,
that's just so Derek White. I mean, like, Andrew Nembhard was a guy I think who really showed up a lot, especially in those finals when he took over from Halliburton. He didn't show any signs of weakness. He just showed that I know I'm capable of doing this, and he went and did it, which was definitely something that was really impressive that I saw. He's definitely one that would stand out for me.
Yeah, Nembhard. I was thinking about Neesmith too, a guy who did not shrink to the occasion. That's a guy who Pacers look at. Hey, he's going to be here next year. He's going to be with us in that next playoff run. He's going to be a big part of that. A guy and a team that will be forgotten quickly in this 2024 playoffs is Paolo Banchero. And Paolo Banchero is year 2, and Magic, their run this season is going to be forgotten. But what they did in that first half, being arguably, I mean, statistically a top 5 team, best defense in the league, and just grinding out games. Banchero and Franz really having success. In his first postseason run, in 7 games against the Cavs, he averaged 27 points on 21 attempts, like huge numbers for a guy who's really taken his first shot here in the playoffs. And he shot 40% on nearly 6 attempts, a number that I don't think anyone expected him to reach from 3. And I wonder how the Magic are going to respond to this, how they're really going to take in that first series. But he's a guy that really surprised me, and I think he's going to have his name in the playoffs. He's going to be one of those faces that we see for a while. He surprised me a lot.
Find some shooting. They got to find some shooting. That's it. They find some shooting, and they don't, without having to give up too much, where they don't still have great size that leads to great defense. That's the ultimate sweet spot for them to this offseason, and their run will only get forgotten if they regress next year. If they match it next year, they even improve on it next year, then like this season will be seen as like that kind of building block. But yeah, Banchero, it was definitely an impressive debut in the playoffs. And you'd almost expect them to go one better, especially if they're in a position where they're going up against a team like the Cavs or someone of that nature next year. Maybe they might not get enough to be able to take down a Boston or a healthy Milwaukee or something like that. But if they're in a situation where they're facing a team that's not like a dead cert like they did with the Cavs this year, I think they should be able to get themselves in a position where you can believe in them winning a playoff series next year.
Yeah, and last name to mention from there, just thinking about players who leveled up and like caught my eye a bit, is that last game between the Cavs and the Celtics. Evan Mobley back against the wall, Donovan Mitchell not there, Garland not really playing his best still, and it's like, all right, just figure out what Mobley can do. Give him the ball, and he showed some real stuff. And he showed it against the Celtics team. We were just desperately trying to get to the next round. That was not just a gimme. And I think what he flashed in that series, in that one game, told me a lot about who he could be. So I think a lot of questions have been going around about Evan Mobley and what his future actually is after he had such a successful rookie season. Had a little bit of trouble the last couple in terms of really breaking that next level of stardom, or even knocking on it. He hasn't really knocked on it yet, but he showed it. And that is a direction too that I wonder how this playoffs, how the outcome of it will influence what they do with their team, what he does as a player to maybe demand more, or the coaching sees in him to demand more out of him offensively. But that was another flash I saw. Do you buy it?
Put their faith in him and play him at the center. I think that's what the Cavs need to do. Yeah. The talk is that they're not going to trade any of their core guys, but I think Mobley can be a star. He can be a star. He has that ability. I think he hasn't got that vote of confidence yet from the team, and I think that's something that they need to do.
Yeah. On the opposite, anybody that popped in your head, you see them play in this playoff series, and either it was their first disappointing playoff series, or maybe one of a few too many. Anybody pops in your head, you're like, that guy needs to go. But I mean, you talk about Timmy. Probably need to upgrade from him on the maps, but anybody else in the playoffs?
Brandon Ingram. I know Dort did great, and I know
they all played bad.
Yeah, I know that, but Brandon Ingram needed to step up in Zion's absence, and he was not able to do so to literally any sort of significant impact. So
yeah, Brent, that one is gonna be a conversation. I mean, the Pels as a whole had so much talent and couldn't break through the Thunder, who just had so much momentum going from them. But that's one. And on the Thunder, I think the first guy that comes to my mind is Josh Giddey. Players who were exposed in the playoffs. Josh Giddey, absolutely exposed in the playoffs, was a big part of their losses at times.
Yeah, I think that was expected, though. I think a lot of people were ready for that.
But I think that was like the answer. That kind of answered the ultimate question of how far can OKC go as they're currently constructed, with him being a serious part of it. And I don't think he fits. And
yeah, maybe that's just what they needed they needed to get that very obvious sign that's time to try and to move him, or to they definitely need to get an upgrade on him. That was definitely maybe that's something that needed to happen for OKC, because I think you heard a lot of the talk about it, that everyone kind of believed that this was going to happen with Giddey in the playoffs, and then obviously it did. It came to fruition. Lost his place in that Mavericks series, and they ultimately went down on it.
Yep. Any other players you shook your faith?
No, I don't think there was anything too dramatic on that side of things. All right, it's time for some playoff awards. Now we're gonna make four picks. We're gonna talk best series, best player, best moment, and most underrated player / moment of the playoffs. Let's start it out. The easiest one, I think, this is completely obvious. The best series of the playoffs, Knicks against 76ers in round one. I don't think there's any debate here. I don't even think this is my bias coming through. The drama that game had, the drama that entire series had, the 40-point games from Brunson, the 50-point game from Embiid, a 1-point differential across the entire series. Like that was by far the most dramatic. That was by far the most watchable series for me. I know it didn't go 7 games. I know they had Denver going down in the 7 games, but think about all the blowouts in that series. This series was drama-filled, dramatic, and probably had some of the most dramatic moments of the entire playoffs all in that round 1 series.
Yeah, and I think that's a good one. I thought about it. I had to pick a couple other ones, but just thinking about those moments the Knicks and 76ers have, importantly, Jalen Brunson reconfirming who he is. Those first couple games where it's like, oh, they kind of got a plan for him. He's not really playing well. What are the Knicks going to do here? And then he shows up. And on the other end of it, Embiid, I mean, hats off to Embiid for playing injured. I mean, he had one of the I think he had probably is that not the play of the entire playoffs when he threw it off the backboard and dunked it? But then, like, obviously he's holding
got injured.
no, legit. But like for him to do that on an injured knee, and just for him to do that his size and like the stuff that we see him do,
him to get injured doing it is just the most typical thing.
Dude, honestly, his entire like player being encapsulated in one play. But also that brings to mind the Josh Hart game. Josh Hart game. I think it was game. I want to say game 3. Yeah, I think it was game 2 or game 3. Game 4. I'm trying to remember. He hits 3 or 4 threes at the end of the game. He had been left open all game long, and then he just goes crazy. He's getting every rebound. He's hitting contested threes at the end of the shot clock. He's hitting clutch free throws. Like Josh Hart saves the Knicks. Honestly, maybe that series in that game there, but crazy one. I got a couple for you though. If you weren't gonna pick that one, I was really torn between T-Wolves and Nuggets or Pacers and Knicks. Those two were my favorites because of the matchups we saw. And while we had a little bit of blowout here, blowout there, a lot of it was a bit of chess match in terms of what they are doing to get those blowouts. But sticking with the Knicks, that's going to be a fun matchup for a while because the Pacers and how fast they play, the speed they play with, kind of matched up with the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks were like, okay, you want to play that fast? All right, here's Josh Hart. Here's Miles McBride. Here's Dante DiVincenzo. We can run with you. That's fine. And then you have the total opposite flow when you give the ball to Brunson and what Brunson does in the half court. There's such an interesting clash of styles between those two teams. And that one's really fun for me.
Yeah, they were both obviously fun series. I'd probably lean towards Timberwolves and Denver just because we both predicted that going 7 games, and then it got to a stage where it looked like, first of all, when the Wolves go up 2-0, we're like, oh my God, are the Wolves actually going to sweep Denver? Or Denver just broken here? And then Denver bounces back, and we're like, oh God, that was just a momentary blip from Denver. They're going to win this in 6. And then obviously it goes to 7 games. And then in that 7th game, it looked like Denver had it wrapped up. And then Wolves make a completely miraculous comeback, which was, it probably won't get remembered as strongly because the Wolves didn't go all the way. But like that was an unbelievable comeback in the late in the 3rd and the start of the 4th quarter to win that game 7. That I don't think anyone really saw coming after the way the game had gone.
Yeah, and the ascension of Anthony Edwards across the league and the average fan too becoming familiarized with the character that is Anthony Edwards, that made that one of my favorites, is seeing him on that stage and seeing him deal with a former champion. That I think that made it my favorite because I love Anthony Edwards as a player, and I love where he's going and how he's developed and what he's doing right now as a young star and how he succeeded against the Nuggets. Like that can't be forgotten. That was a bona fide championship team, and they had a battle to get that series win. And even though they got gentlemen swept by Luka and the Mavs, like we can't forget, like they beat the champions. They beat the champions. That means something. And that for that to go to 7, for them to win in a game 7 against Jokic and that squad, that can't be understated enough how impressive that was.
Like you can make me like I think you can make an argument that they were played one of the biggest parts in the Celtics being the NBA championships by taking down the Denver
by
Nuggets.
taking down the Nuggets. Yeah,
Like I genuinely believe that to be true. But as we're talking about him, Rose, I'll just answer my next question. Player of the playoffs. I'm going to Anthony Edwards. I think
Interesting.
his ascension to superstardom in these playoffs was just so impressive, and like just getting to know him on the biggest stage, still that same fun-loving character, still that confident killer of a performer, and we saw that all with across 2 series wins, one really dramatic one taking down that the defending champs, but also taking down the superstar Suns as well, the sweep, like absolutely destroying them. Averaged 27.6 points per game, 7 boards, 6.5 assists. First 2 series wins for him as a player. The first 2 series wins for the Timberwolves since 2004. He had 3 40-point games. I mean, this was a really impressive run, and I know it ended disappointingly in the Western Conference Finals, but the breakout of Anthony Edwards was arguably the great storyline of these playoffs.
Yeah, I want to say he's a fun pick, and there's a lot of fun picks. But I think the answer is undoubtedly Luka Doncic. It's undoubtedly, and it's because all of the arguments will be, why isn't it Luka Doncic?
Yeah,
because he's the reason the Mavs are in the finals, and this is all despite some of the detractions against him for his defense, for the effort, for just yapping at the refs and the focus there. But when Luka Doncic turns it on, he wins games. When he turns it on, the Mavs wins games. And that's a level that nobody else in the playoffs really showed, to be honest. Like you saw Jokic get there at times, but couldn't pull it out to get to the finals. And the Celtics are not built like that. And I'm glad we're not talking about that's another conversation didn't happen with the Celtics is, why isn't Tatum bet? Like, that's not who he is. But Luka's that guy. I mean, the league needs guys like that who are a bit hero ball on that next level. And Luka is that. And he did it time and time again and just faced a better opponent. But he was the most impressive player in terms of playing through that injury, first of all. Like, he's not getting enough credit for what he did despite having that
7 different injuries he had.
No, seriously. Yeah. And really battled through that. Like, he, for me, is a easy pick player this playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, not gonna argue with that at all. I mean, Luka he is that guy. He's that hero sort of player, and that's always easy to get behind. And I think, like we were saying before, though, that the reason that conversation didn't have to happen about Tatum and Brown and guys is because they didn't have to face the Nuggets. I think if they had to face the Nuggets, we would have had to have that conversation. Moment of the playoffs.
So many.
Going for your boy, Luka. The shot over Gobert.
Yeah,
that was just like the killer. That was like the killer moment of the playoffs, the killer moment of that series. I think that shot he hit over Rudy Gobert, and like obviously the fact that it was over Gobert as well. Everyone wants to question him as a DPOY, but that was just Luka in his bag, destroying a guy that should never have been out there guarding him.
Yeah, that has to be the moment of the playoffs. Just the way he just stared him down and just roared in his face. And that was just the crowning moment of him over the Timberwolves, over everyone in the West. That's the easy pick. I got a few honorable mentions that I want to think about. Thinking back to Lakers and Nuggets, and Lakers playing some good basketball against Nuggets. I think we can't forget that the Nuggets lost the point difference. I think they won it by they won it by less than 10. Like those games were close. Like they were losing every single quarter except for the fourth, and it's because of shots like Murray hitting it from the corner. He was 80 in his face. Murray fading to his left with 2 defenders right on him just to put the dagger right in the Lakers. 2 games won by miraculous shots by Murray. He had so many moments actually in the playoffs, like his ridiculous layup going left behind his head, AD right on top of him, hitting that to get the Nuggets up, and then the half court shot he's hitting against the Timberwolves to really put that punctuation mark again on that Game 3 win. just like he's a guy that always puts out crazy moments. So I'm gonna give him honorable mention for all the shots he made.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, I think Dante DiVincenzo's triple against the 76ers was obviously a cool moment as
Oof.
well. We know it was a
Yeah.
foul, but we move on. It counted, so you gotta remember that for what it actually was, and that was a huge clutch make from him. The Josh Hart triple against 76ers, another big one. Maxi's triple, his double triple to force
Yeah, should
to
have been a
force
4-point
OT.
play. It almost was a 4-point play, and then the 30-foot pull up.
Like
Like,
that was just a lot of big moments, but I think Luka, that killer moment for Luka to just show Rudy Gobert and the Timberwolves who was boss was definitely had to lead the way. All right, underrated moment / player. I've gone for a moment here. I think Jaylen Brown's triple to force overtime in Game 1 against the Pacers.
yeah,
I think that was a real turning point for everyone to just show this Boston team means business. And I think from that moment on,
New York,
Boston Garden became a haven that they just loved playing in. It became that extra bit louder. There was no more tension playing at home anymore for these Celtics. And that was like that making that shot and then going on to win that game. That was like the release valve. Okay, we got this.
yeah. Jaylen Brown. Saying you still got Brunson on your mind.
I said Jalen Brunson. My God,
Yeah,
my
he's
bad.
always on your
Jaylen
mind, I
Brown.
know.
Jaylen Brown.
that was the Pacers Celtics series could have been so much closer. So much closer. Game 2 was sketchy. That could have been lost. Game 3 was also sketchy.
Game 2 was not sketchy. Game 2, the Boston blew them out in Game 2.
They pulled away. They pulled away, but they had moments where it was looking like they could come back. Again, it's all PTSD. You never know. Never know the Celtics, but now we do. I was thinking about also in that series, Drew Holiday's steal to protect I want to say the Game 3 win.
Yeah. That was definitely huge.
It was moments like that you saw time and time again, but especially in the clutch. So you think about that play, and then you think about him also stripping Tyrese Halliburton, whether I forget if it was Game 1 or Game 2 down the stretch, but he had so many clutch steals. That underrated player, underrated moment. He had them all, and a guy that they acquired in the offseason, the only healthy offseason acquisition they had, and those are moments like that where you're like, okay, this team is so complete when you have a guy like Drew Holiday making plays like that down the clutch.
I think he should pay his bonus to the Milwaukee Bucks for winning the title. Or the Celtics should pay the Milwaukee Bucks a bonus for winning the title. Yeah, he had a lot of underrated moments, and I think he arguably is the most underrated player of the playoffs. Drew Holiday. He was just so like once they were able to bring him in, that led to Porzingis just being that X factor. That like Porzingis being healthy certified them they couldn't lose. And like once Drew Holiday came in, like first of all, Porzingis came in, offers something different, bit more scoring. But then when they get Drew Holiday on top of that, that was like he became that insurance policy. And then Porzingis was like the one that put them over the edge. Like the difference that Drew Holiday made to this team, like having the backcourt with Drew Holiday and Derek White, like that's just scary. Two guys that are just going to play as hard as anyone in the league. Who are going to play pretty much as good a defense as a backcourt as anyone in the league, who can hit the 3-ball, who can play make, like just a scarily built team, this Boston team. And Andrew Holiday was such a vital part of this title win.
Yeah, so many underrated players. Celtics have a ton of them.
Celtics like whole team outside of Tatum and Brown.
I don't know. Mavs, what about their game in Game 2 against Timberwolves? It's coming down to the wire. And Doncic throws a full court pass to Daniel Gafford, who's falling over and hits the layup. I believe to go up by 4 at that point.
Daniel Gafford was awesome in that series against Timberwolves.
Yes, and everything he did throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, like especially that series where his paint protection was at an elite level. Everything about it, like that series, like his crowning moment. Like the previous series, it was more about Derek Lively. But then in that Timberwolves series, he became the lead guy there, and he was awesome in that game. Like Lively as well as a rookie, doing what he did was so impressive. Like PJ Washington, that the series against OKC, they probably don't win the series without PJ Washington doing what he did.
Yeah, I guess that makes me like this is part of the underrated or maybe that rating needs to change. What besides like the Mavs, like those guys obviously outplayed our expectations, so
Yeah.
much so. Super underrated. Now we have to appreciate that, and me maybe a little bit more so, especially from what I thought after the trade deadline. But um, anybody else really outperformed. I think the Pacers guys too. The Pacers guys really outperformed what I thought they could do,
Yeah.
especially when they were down Halliburton, how they still fought through that. That really impressed me. I think those guys are very, very underrated. Will continue to grow. Um, anybody else?
Yeah, no, there's always the guys. Like, I mean, J Dub obviously struggled in moments against the Mavs, but he still looked pretty impressive in that playoffs. And even Shea, like that was Shea's first playoff experience. We kind of forget about that, like his first major playoff experience, and he was as dominant as he was during the regular season. And I think he's only going to get better from here. Uh, who else have we got? Got to kind of trying to give everyone their credit. Everyone deserves their flowers.
Right?
That
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Everyone is a
Don't want to get into
piss-rage
everyone doesn't get a medal these days. Got to get away from that idea of thinking.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts then before we take a look over to some negative news around the Pistons? Surprise, surprise.
Oh, let's jump into that. Dive right headfirst into it.
Yeah, I mean, should we be surprised? This is the Detroit Pistons after all. More negativity coming out for them. Monty Williams has been fired. Last summer, he signed the largest contract in history, I believe. And
Yep.
throughout this season, that contract has been like a way for other coaches to get more money and better extensions. And now he's out in his ass after 1 year, which is pretty funny. And they now owe him $65 million over the next the next 5 years.
Wild. May 2023, he's fired by the Phoenix Suns, and he got a $20 million buyout from that. And then the next year, or that next month, got hired for the 6 year, $78.5 million deal. And then now he gets a $65 million buyout. So in 1 year, $85 million
To do nothing.
for
That's awesome.
nothing.
That is a
Oh
good
my
life. I need to
gosh.
figure out a trick like that. That's some good stuff. But I mean, I text you this, like it makes all the sense in the world, but also no sense at all. But at the end of the day, they won 14 games last year. They actually got worse. They won 17 games the season before, and they amazingly got worse. And it wasn't because they were tanking for a guy like a Victor Wembanyama or anything. They were just really, really bad. And they had the longest single season losing streak ever. And just no consistency whatsoever. There was no players that you really watched and thought were getting better playing under Monty Williams. And like hearing stuff from guys that cover the Pistons more closely, it just felt like a bad marriage from day one. And I think both sides are pretty happy that it's over.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's two ways to look at it. One is, and everything revolves around the development of the young players.
Mm-hmm.
And continuity of coaching is really important. Really, really important. It's tough to win when you're constantly changing coaches, you're constantly changing strategies, and you're constantly changing roles, which are dependent on whoever's coaching you. But I think
Unless
in
you're
this
the Celtics.
case, yes, but in this case, you really have to look at what you're saying in terms of the locker room talk and the vibes there, and the vibes were never great. There was never any sort of loyalty there that was built. There was never really any firm foundation of roles that constantly were changing. Asar's in and out, Jaden's in and out, Cade never took a step forward. And I think the thing is, when you look at this team, you have a collection of guys that make sense and a collection of guys who should take steps forward. And this is a really tenuous period of time where you don't want to lose that development. And do you risk another year of this? Even though you could argue, hey, he's a great head coach and you just need to try and figure it out moving forward, but you don't want to miss out. I mean, look at the roster, man. Like Cade Cunningham, that's I still believe in him as a he can be a fulcrum of an offense. Jaden Ivey, he's still a very talented young guard, one of the most athletic players in the league. Asar Thompson, what we saw from him last season, and then even on the role player side, like Simone Fontecchio, he's shown enough. Like he's a guy that I think could be a great role player for years. Quentin Grimes,
Jalen Duran as well.
Jalen Duren, yeah.
I
Oh
think
my God,
Jalen Duran
yeah.
could be a really great center.
Yeah. So I mean, they have enough young guys to build around that they need to be careful with this. And I mean, I don't know if keep guys like Taj Gibson around because if you can sign him, like they just need more adults in the room. They need more leadership, and maybe Monty wasn't that guy. We'll see who they do bring in, but that's gonna be such a huge decision because this is one of those years where it might be 1 year too many with this young core, and you have to restart all over again.
Yeah, that's true. And like obviously, what have they got this year? The fifth pick, I think they have in the draft. Obviously, there's
They're
nothing
not in the
to
top 5.
no.
They're
Where are
not
they?
in or they're not in the top 4. I'd rather say.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have the 5th pick. I think it's the Hawks, the Wizards, the
Yeah, they're
Rockets,
5th.
the Spurs, and then them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not the most sought after draft class, so it's hard to know what they're gonna end up drafting, what position they look to add there. Will they look to package that pick and try and add some veteran presence within this young squad? It's going to be interesting to see what moves they decide to make, but I think obviously it looks bad when you think that they gave a guy a 6-year deal, the richest contract in coaching history at the time, and they've given up on it after a year. But I think new front offices come in, maybe realized that it was a bad decision, maybe just took account that the players weren't really in a good headspace. The marriage, like I said, the marriage just wasn't there, and this was, as much as it's kind of a slap in the face to have to pay that sort of money to a guy that's no longer working for you. I think in terms of actually achieving success and having this next year be the start of the turnaround, I think it was an important decision to make.
Yeah. The risk is far greater than that $60 million that you're losing. Far greater. To have another lost season. Like you said, this is going to be a very important season. And in the Eastern Conference, like it's still gonna be a tough go for them to prove anything. You got to get through teams who have already started to make that stride. The Magic have already made that stride, and I think the Hawks will. Hopefully, they'll figure things out to be better next year. There's still teams in the bottom of the East that they're gonna need to get through, and this is
win 20 games next year. Win 20 games. Let's not even set the bar too high. Well, let's say win 20 games next year and have and hope that I don't know, Cade is almost being mentioned in the All-Star conversation. I think that's got to be the minimum I think that you got to expect from the Pistons next year.
Yeah, and not to belabor this type of conversation too long, but the dynamics of the bottom of the East are kind of interesting between them and Charlotte because you're not searching for that star. You think you have him, and you're not searching for that second star because you think you have kind of that collection. For the Pistons, maybe more so a couple guys who make up that second, that 2A, 2B type player. And then in Charlotte, you got Brandon Miller. So they have teams that feel like they're close to completing at least the key parts of their core. So they're not going to be, hopefully not tanking too hard. They're not going to be trying to be bad. They're going to be trying to be improved. So there's not a lot. I don't think there's going to be anyone tanking.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Well, obviously there's a few bright spot prospects in the 2025 class. So who knows? The Pistons maybe they will try to tank again. But I like to think, I think they owe their fans legitimate winning. Trying to
win. How many more
win.
apologies can you have?
Yeah.
How many more public apologies to the city of Detroit can you have?
Oh man, for real, right? But let's finish it out here. Let's just say any closing thoughts on this season, or any thoughts of looking ahead? Any quick thoughts looking ahead to this off season, next season?
Parity. Last season, even the season before that, we felt it, and this season we got to see it firsthand. parity and the growth of young players. I think as every season goes on, like we said, this season didn't have your top 5 guys that you usually think of. You didn't have your Steph Currys. You didn't have your LeBron Jameses out there. And you had instead guys like Anthony Edwards step forward onto the stage. Guys had like Luka Doncic step back into the stage. And it's cool to see that. And it's cool to see, like we mentioned, the Magic teams that are making strides. Young guys like Evan Mobley making their mark known. Oklahoma City, that whole team of young guys, how much better they're going to get. There's just so many hungry teams out there that are so well balanced and so many good ownership groups out there. And yeah, closing remark, and I'll be selfish about it. It's a tough time to be a team like the Bulls, a team like the Hawks, teams that are not on the right direction in any way, shape, or form, because there is so much fun basketball out there. There's so much competitive basketball, and I think it's going to continue. It's going to even be better next year.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. One thing that's definitely on my mind is what teams can bounce back next year. Like, think Warriors, Grizzlies, Bucks.
Oh my God,
Suns.
Grizzlies! Yeah, we forget very quickly about them.
What sort of bounce
Suns,
back
no.
are we gonna see? What sort of things need to go on this offseason in order for these teams to have a bounce back? But definitely to go with the big things, like obviously you said it all in terms of this season. I think that was absolutely the right way to round it up. I think a gigantic summer ahead for the 76ers and a gigantic summer ahead for the Los Angeles Lakers. They need to get this coaching hire right. I think it's looking likely that's going to be JJ Redick, which feels like a matter of time. But they need to get that decision right, and they need to decide, do they still want to win with LeBron James, or do they want to, I don't know, cheat the system, getting a star guard that will still be there when LeBron's gone and just hope that it brings success? Or do they actually want to build a roster around LeBron and AD that could actually try and contend? And then for the 76ers, they obviously got a lot of cap space. They've got Maxey, they've got Embiid. How can they build this team into what they hope will actually be a team capable of finally getting past the second round, which they have not done in a very long time? But the biggest thing for me, New York Knicks, run it back. Run it back. You obviously got to pay OG Anunoby and do whatever you can to convince Hartenstein. I know obviously other teams are able to offer him more money, so that might be difficult, and I wouldn't begrudge him for going and taking that more money. They got to find a way to show that New York's the right place for him and just pitch it to him as well as they can to convince him to sign for less money. But I need to see these Knicks run it back next year. I need to see them be healthy in the playoffs. I need to see at least 1 year of this team running it back again.
Yeah, I need to see you happy. I love to see it. The Knicks being good is good. We love the Knicks being good. But yeah, man, the offseason is coming. I feel like it's one of our busiest times. There's still so much happening. There's still so many fun conversations to be had, so many changes that could happen across the league. And with all these teams being so close to contention, it's going to keep getting more competitive in the offseason. So I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, we got a lot to look forward to. It never stops. The NBA season never stops. As soon as the finals are done, we move into the draft. We move into free agency, big deals going down, trades like we saw last year. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it this year. And we will have it covered for you all here on Coast to Coast. But for today, that's going to round us out this episode. My thanks to Chris for joining me. Thank you all so much for listening. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics. Don't worry, the Knicks will beat you next year. But that's a wrap on the 2023-2024 NBA season. Remember, we are everywhere at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.